Hi, fifth grade families. So today I thought it would be very helpful if I were to come on and record a video that would benefit the kids, but also benefit anyone that's supporting them with tonight's homework and then moving forward. So in the previous newsletter, one of the things that I shared was this particular quarter, we are working as writers on after, of course, we finish our identity poems, we're going to be focusing our efforts on writing historical fiction pieces. Okay, and so a lot of what we're doing as historians and writers will complement each other. All right, and this video will talk about how I'm planning to scaffold the kids into that type of writing. So, what we're doing right now is kind of rewinding and taking a look back at some of what I think is the time periods that the kids we just kind of need to brush up on, and that will be Civil War, which would have been some topics that they would have explored in fourth grade. And so, typically Civil War and Reconstruction, that they usually kind of explore that in the fourth grade, but we're going to reach back and do that. And so, what I decided to do, as you know, also I pointed out that one of the ways that we'll learn a lot about historical time periods and people and so forth will be through primary and secondary sources, just a lot of interactive things, and so just a variety of ways that we'll go about doing that. And this particular time period, I thought that it would be one really fun for the kids to have take a more interactive approach, but then also to bring in different types of resources for us to do so that we can just kind of move through these different time periods like in a more timely manner, but not rush through it, but so the kids can still have an exploratory approach, ask great questions, but then also be able to take in information in different ways, no matter what type of learner they are, visual, auditory, whatever. So what we're doing is to kind of introduce that. Overall, we're doing a simulation. All right, it's going to be this week now. Time has already thrown us off with testing, but it's all good. Okay, so what I've decided to do is this will span several days. On the first day, which will be today, just kind of getting some background information, general background information. Obviously, not covering it all, but just kind of what led to or what led up to the war. And so one of the ways to do that is that we've done that is we're using atlases in class to study that. So we have a United States Atlas that just kind of gives us a condensed um, version of different topics throughout American history, right? And so this particular topic where we're starting is, how did the institution of slavery divide the nation altogether? And so it kind of gives us some points here. And then what I love about these is that it includes lots of different text features that will engage the kids' interest and to sort of add the information. So they have to know how to read this nonfiction in different ways. And so we have a mixture of things. So we have different types of graphs and also maps. And this, just observing the kids today, some things that I was really proud of is not that they were just reading the text, but I just kind of captured kids having conversations about the things that they were noticing in the graphs and the maps. But one thing that I made note to teach into is that sometimes they are skipping some of the captions or not noticing some of the symbols that will give indication to what's happening in the map. So just taking in everything, but also the little parts and pieces too. And they're having to compare maps as well, and of course attend to different time periods and how it's representing different information and changes over time. So it gives key dates, photographs as well, and of course, as I've already mentioned, different types of maps. So we have population maps here, and we also have other things that are represented here, including things about the economy during that particular time. So they were able to take in a lot of this information, and so they had an opportunity to just kind of read through this, kind of talk about what it is that they noticed and what information it was providing. And then I also follow up with just some kind of things to add to that, okay? Add this information, okay? So the kids got into partnerships. Yesterday, they randomly chose, as their name is spun on the wheel, and whomever's name it landed on, they chose what partner they wanted to have during the simulation. And each partner, once they had them, will also, what they have is they learned that they chose a random identity. They had no idea who they're going to be. They have to take on this person's perspective. This is mine. So I'm a Union Army nurse, and it for each person's identity or each family identity, it gives them just a little bit of background, right? Then an advantage that that person or family may have, or just like a pro or a plus, and then of course a challenge that they may be facing during this time based on who they are. So we're taking on different perspectives from the war, and we have several of them. And so these guys, we have an escaped enslaved person that is also going to be fighting in the Union Army, a Union supporting family, an abolitionist family, and the kids also have this same thing glued in their social studies notebook. Each person has theirs. A border state family who's kind of like in the middle. They're sort of neutral. They're divided between the North and South and all that. And then a Confederate supporting family, a family that is still enslaved, a Southern woman whose family, husband and sons are off at the war, and so she's having to, quote unquote, man the farm and run it herself. A free black family, and it goes into challenges that they're still facing. And also immigrants that live in the North, and so Irish and German immigrants here. So they have their identity, all right, or their role, as I pointed out to the kids. You can think of it as like, being an actress or an actor and having to take on this particular role. You have to learn information about that person so that you can assume the character, and all of your actions and everything else just kind of is based on that character. All right, so today we went back over our roles or our identities. We had a chance to share out what they were, and some of the kids were like, it was some great conversations coming out of it, but they were very surprised, right? And so they didn't get to choose based on like what their own opinion is about it. They just randomly chose, and so that's going to be the fun part, is seeing them take on that perspective no matter how they feel, so without bias. So today, once we shared these, I shared with them that one of the things they're going to do before we start the simulation is kind of tap into their feelings, right? And so they're going to be writing diary entries, and this is the part that I want to kind of get more into. So this diary entry will pretty much kind of capture their feelings right now about some things. So just to kind of go over this, you're going to be thinking about, here's some just kind of some tips, right? Things they want to consider. This is in general because they're going to have more than one, but that person's daily life, what is it like, okay? If they have chores, what they do, how do they travel, and this has to be authentic, right? What food do they eat? This may not come up in every entry, however, these are just some things to consider. Time appropriate objects, you want to be able to authentically represent this person or family, okay? Because of the time period that we're in. What kind of things would be seen or used in that time, whether it's at home, whether it's for their job. And describe their feelings during the war. So that is going to depend on who it is, right? What they're worried about, what they're hoping for, right? What they're proud of, all right? What they regret. And then also, similarly, everyday hardships that they have to deal with, okay? And so for me, I'm a nurse, so I'm having to think about sickness, not just for the people who, are wounded or, are hurt, but myself, protecting myself from disease, all right? And then other things too, that they might want to, have to think about dealing with. And then language is definitely important as well, how things are said. Now, this might be a challenge because if they're not exposed to that, or they don't have much background information about that, this might be a little bit challenging. It doesn't necessarily have to come up now, right? But instead of saying I'm super hungry, which is probably how some people might say it, not all, then weary is a word that would have commonly been used, right? Like it's worrying me, it's making me weary with hunger. Or instead of I miss dad a lot, my heart aches for father's or papa's return, depending on who you are and what you would call that person, okay? So, how they got their information or how long it took to get their information, that's another thing. And then, of course, just staying true to the character, right? What they might do based on who they are. Just keep it authentic. That's pretty much what all of this is, just keeping it authentic in character, okay? So what I did, what I thought was helpful, and I think I might backtrack, okay? And do this again tomorrow to support some of the kids. But if you're watching this and you feel like it might be helpful, what I'm doing is sort of taking this and adding another scaffold to that. And this is just simple but effective, right? So what I've done is thought about, even though I've already written an example as a diary entry, is how can I take this information, right, and then make it so that I can think through some of my ideas, right? So as a nurse, a Union Army nurse, like what's some things that I might want to capture about my daily life, right? Things I do on a daily basis. What are some objects that I use? What are feelings that I have during wartime, right? And this will be sort of at the beginning, right? And then, of course, challenges that I face as a nurse and things I might say, language from that time period. And so, again, this might be a little bit tricky right now until we get a little bit more information. And so, if your child is kind of stuck with this or just having a little bit of trouble, you might have them do this as well. This is not something that I had the kids do in class, but if you're watching this ahead of time, they can kind of get a jump on that, and that might help them, and then we'll work on the draft part tomorrow. And so, in the daily life, this is more like, okay, what kind of chores do you, or what are your responsibilities, right? What do I eat? How do I travel? That kind of thing. Like, what's life like for a nurse on a daily basis? Well, for me, if I'm thinking I'm already in wartime, all right, and so I am on the field, all right, or in the field, all right, and so sun up to sundown, I am working or treating wounded soldiers. Okay, and so because this is pretty much all I'm doing, my friends, I'm very exhausted. And this is something that actually came out of my card. Okay, like I'm tired all the time. Okay, because it's nonstop. Right, I don't get to take a vacation or take some time off here, so I'm exhausted. All right, I'm scared. Okay, of you know the amount of disease that's out there. But another thing, it doesn't have to just be things that I fear about my feelings, but I'm also proud because I'm a female, which that's not something that's very common during this time for females to be um, serving any kind of role during wartime. All right, so I'm a female nurse, which is not common. All right, so I'm very proud of that. All right, and so in some ways, I also feel sort of strong too because I'm able to help others and save lives. Sorry about the handwriting, guys. And then some hardships and challenges that I face as a nurse. I have to see death on a daily basis. All right, and then other challenges I face is resources, not having enough resources, like medicine to treat the wounded soldiers. Okay, so not having enough of those. um, those are just other challenges. So, and overall, it's just dangerous because I'm right near the action. I'm right there. So I'm just kind of thinking through some of these ideas so that will help me kind of giraffe what I'm going to say, some objects that I use. Now, here's the tricky part. especially with me being a nurse. So if this is an occupation, right? I don't want the kids to be thinking about what things are like now, but let's go back to this particular time period. What might have been readily available to these people, and obviously, we're going to discount things like cell phones and cars, right? That's not going to be the case here. So I might have like some type of scalpel, right? It may not be the modern stuff, all right? And then needle, because sewing is one thing for me, all right? That's something I was used to, but needle and thread, I'm going to need when, somebody needs to have a wound sewed up, and I might have to do that, all right? And so we're going to have bandages, which are not the Band-Aid, but bandages, some type of fabric to make what do you call it? I'm trying to get something like to keep or to stop someone from bleeding. And so you just kind of make it up. And so then just adding as much detail as possible. Now this is obviously going to be different based on who your child's identity is going to be, and so they'll want to consider those things. And again, this is I'm going to have to work on this one, because again, it's going to be tricky until they learn it. And so I want to make sure that I can spell that. Tourniquet. So I want to do the arrow to that. And that is something that they would use. And so, life-saving device in war. And so I could, looking it up here. It may not be that particular device, but those are just some things that I wanted to make sure I added here. So from here, even though, again, I've given the kids a sample or an example, I'll say that, making sure that some of these things are present in their diary entry. Here are the instructions. They're wanting to write a diary entry, and it's diary entry number 1. And they have this, it's a half sheet, it's glued in their notebook as their character. Okay, and so I wrote one, it's down here. Capturing details about what they saw, smelled, felt, worried, or what they're worried about right now. Right? It doesn't have to have all of that, right? And they'll all be different, but write it from that particular point of view. And it's going to be first person because you're speaking as that person, right? And so first person is, they're going to be using words like I, me, we, us, right? Those kind of things, because they're speaking from that person's perspective. All right, and so I take care of injured soldiers, and here's my entry, right? And so I'm just going to kind of look, and I know now that I'm going to probably revise this, because I wrote this, and then now I'm considering other things that I might want to add, right? So today I reported for duty at the field hospital. So this is kind of early on in the war, or leading up to it. And so I never thought my hands, trained only for sewing and cooking, would be asked to bind wounds and wash blood from uniforms. And so, that's something that I didn't put here. And so maybe they have lye soap, which is going to help them clean the uniforms. All right. And so sewing, she does sewing, so we definitely want to have some needle and thread for sewing up wounds. And then the doctors looked surprised to see a woman when I stood my ground. See, I'm proud. And so again, these are some feelings. And then captured that here. I told them I was here to help. They finally handed me a pail of water and pointed to a cot where a young soldier groaned in pain. All right, so that is just an environmental object that's just going to be present there. But of course, washing the wounds, I may want to add that, right? Pail for washing wounds. Again, thinking about everyday objects you would use as that person. And I feel afraid, but also determined. If the war has taken so many sons, then perhaps it needs more daughters to give them comfort. Okay, and so here Again, if they're struggling with this, and at minimum 5 to 6 sentences complete, right? Them capturing their thoughts and feelings, all right? Then, if they're struggling with that, let's use this as a scaffold, right? Capture the hardships or challenges, which they can draw some from their cards that they got. Their daily life as a person. Objects that they would use. Now, this doesn't just mean for their job, it also means in daily life what are some objects that they would use, that would include things inside their home, whatever is pertinent to that particular person. And then things they might say, we can hold off on that right now unless they research that information. But the idea here is to get an authentic picture of that person, situate them in that time period, because we know that when we read historical fiction, the history part, the events, that information, that's real, right? That actually happened. It's based on those events. However, the characters are made up in historical fiction. So what we're doing here is building or working our way up to writing historical fiction stories where we are creating these characters that are dealing with things that have happened in history, right? So some particular time period. So this is our way of kind of working our way up to that, is just to write short entries to prepare the kids for taking on perspective or a different point of view, and using authentic details. And sometimes those details or the information about this stuff will come from other sources, not just things that we read, but then also interacting with other things like primary sources and recordings and all that stuff. And so all of those things will play a part in adding to our knowledge base. But tonight, that's it. If your child is very comfortable with going ahead to write their entry, which is about a paragraph long, then they can do that, right? Early on in the ward. And then if they're just needing some more support, then they can do a graphic organizer where they capture these things that might be helpful to them, okay? And that will help support them when moving on to drafting that first entry, okay? I hope that this helps. Please reach out if you have any additional questions about either setting up a web to kind of prepare the kids for writing a paragraph, or if you have questions about using the tips to write this particular entry, right? And these are just ideas for inspiration. They are not, used for or recommended to use for prescription at all. It's just to give the kids some ideas about things that they might want to include in there so that it feels real and authentic. Okay, but again, this is already taken or included to their notebooks, and they also have this information as well, which includes my sample there. Okay, all right. Let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate your support. Bye, everybody.